There was an article in The Intercept written by Rachel Cohen titled, "Conservatives Are Nudging the Supreme Court to Dismantle Affordable Housing Policies." I won't get in too much into Rachel Cohen's article itself, but what I want to get into is the policy that is addressed in her article, and that's inclusionary zoning. What is inclusionary zoning? Okay, a basic definition of that would be that there are laws put into city ordinances that require real estate developers to reserve a certain number of units in new housing complexes for tenants or buyers in some cases with modest incomes. So if you've got 100 units, 25, let's just say 25 of them have to be affordable housing. So they have to meet some kind of median income affordability bracket. So, this house has to be affordable for someone who makes $50,000 a year, and they could only make such and such amount of payment, or they can only afford such and such mortgage payment. So that's inclusionary zoning, and it's been rolled out in about 886 cities according to a 2016 count. Now, the other thing too is that these policies also sometimes come with a fee associated. For example, in San Jose, California, there's an opt-out fee per unit of $122,000, or a 15% requirement for buildings with over 20 units, right? And now the intention of these programs is that people have access to affordable housing. Now, the problem is that these policies only are able to target a very small supply of the housing stock. In New York, studies have shown that only about 1.7% of housing that came online actually was affordable housing. So a few thousand units in a city of millions of people hardly puts a dent in the problem. And what actually ends up happening, and studies have shown what happens, is that because the developers have to bear this cost, it acts as a de facto tax on new development. And the people that end up bearing the cost of these programs are either the buyers or renters themselves that are not affordable housing buyers. So everyone else who bought a house at market rate is somehow paying an inflated price. Landowners have to inflate the price or eat the cost. And the builders also are bearing these costs. And it's not apparent that this is really something that we can scale or sustain, and that's better than any other policy, or simply just making zoning laws more relaxed. And, what's really important to get is that there are private solutions to these housing issues. We just had Damian Browning on. They are a housing provider. Steps to Recovery is a housing provider. There are other kinds of group housing for people on low incomes. There are nonprofit developers that operate that create affordable housing, but affordable with the lowercase a, meaning it's just a simple unit. It's not a luxury place. It's small. It's affordable. Maybe the commute's a little longer, but this is a sustainable way to develop property. And for the nonprofit developers, they're obviously not in it for the money. And so they're able to do this sustainably without government funding, but actually give a really good amount of supply. And the other thing too, for example, in New York, is that their inclusionary zoning was tied into what's called the floor area ratio. The floor area ratio basically means you can only build so many square feet on this amount of acreage. So let's say you have 1 acre, and they say you can only build 10 acres worth of square footage. So you can only build 400,000 square feet, so maybe you go up only 20 stories. But if you're in Manhattan, you might need to go up 40 to make it work. And so they've restricted things like that in various cities. And it's important to pay attention when cities have made it difficult to actually build at all and made it more difficult. And to try to remediate that situation with something like inclusionary zoning would be backwards. It would be better to simply get rid of the rule that's not working in the first place and to let people do what they need to do to actually produce affordable housing, reasonable housing.
got me down on the ground like I see double vision. Aisles of mirrors and mirrors.